Today I'm gonna be awarding up to 6 stars to each legend and their signature spell from Spiritforged expansion, but also I'm gonna be doing a tier list of how those legends I think will gonna find themselves in the metagame. Let's go. I just wanted to preface that I think this expansion has great power level and most of their legends are playable, even if I'm giving them a lower rating. First is gonna be Rumble, red and blue colors, just like Kai'Sa, and your mechs have shield, +1 when they're defenders. Now, I don't think currently we have enough mechs or like enough impactful mechs to make Mechanism Menace a contender for top tier slots. He's still playable, I'm giving him 3 stars, which is okay, right? He might be rising up in ranks in the future, but right now I feel like you can just play a mech deck with the most playable mechs in a Kai'Sa deck, and that will be enough, and Kai'Sa will give you more value than your Mechanism Menace in theory, because you're still gonna use spells, you're still gonna use removal, you're still gonna use Falling Star or Piercing Line or both. Actually, I feel like most decks are gonna play just like a combination of those, like 3+2, so like 3 Falling Stars, 2 Piercing Lights, or maybe 2 Falling Stars, 2 Piercing Lights, who the hell knows. But I feel like Kai'Sa will still deliver you more value than the Mechanism Menace. So if that would be the case, your reason to play Rumble would be its signature spell. And when we are looking at Danger Zone, so 1 energy, 1 power, it has reaction speed and repeat for the same cost, give your mechs +1 this turn. That's a great card. I'm giving it 4 stars. It's a very good card and it limits itself to mechs. Again, I don't think you have enough of a pool to actually make this matter for now. So if I would like to play Danger Zone instead of Kai'Sa's Ekafian Rain, I feel like I'm cutting myself a little bit of like options when it comes to deck building. So I feel like I want to play mechs, I'm gonna play Kai'Sa with mechs, but in the future this might change. And think about it this way, Danger Zone, when it's actually gonna be played in a deck that has a lot of playable mechs, now this is gonna be a banger spell because it doesn't work in the same way like Siphon Power does. For example, when we compare it, right? Because Siphon Power is Invicta, so blue and yellow. It gives you +1 on a battlefield and -1 to the opponent, right? This one is a global effect only for your side, right? And you can repeat it for having similar cost, because it's gonna be, when it comes to Siphon Power, it's 2 energy and 1 power. Danger Zone is gonna be 2 energy and 2 power, right? But it's gonna give you almost the same outcome, but it's not limited to 1 battlefield. So you're gonna be able to divide those buffs to the might on both battlefields and your base, and then attack into the second battlefield. So it's a decent finisher. So it's a decent signature spell, but until to the point where I feel like Rumble can be played as a legend just with the mechs alone, I don't think it's gonna be worth to play this overall for now. So for now, I'm putting Rumble in the C tier, which is gonna be still playable, but not the best. The signature spell is Relentless Pursuit for 2 energy and 1 power cost. Move a friendly unit, you may attach an equipment with the same controller to it. This turn that unit has when I concur, you may move me to my base. It's a great trick, but again, its power comes from having other pieces on the chessboard already, right? You need to have a unit, but you also should have an equipment. If you don't have those 2 pieces, your card is kinda useless. So the high synergy that Lucian requires to make it work, I feel like just makes it incredibly awkward in the upcoming metagame to actually matter. Now, he might come handy in a moment where the metagame will cool down with like the equipment hate, and then suddenly there will be a moment for him to strike in one event where no one is ready for that kind of aggressive, mobile kind of equipment based deck that will just be aggroing everyone out of their minds. Now, well, I don't think that's gonna be coming up in the next metagame, and that's why I'm giving both of his signature spell and the legend a 3 star. Next one is gonna be Draven in colors of Annie, red and purple, which are insane colors, right? When you win a combat, draw 1. You win if only your units remain after combat, which combos with like Gust and other like kind of removal spell that is based on moving your opponent's units, because even if the fight ends with no one being at the battlefield, you still win, right? So you're gonna be able to draw cards. Now the problem is that many people were just like, oh my god, that's insane, that's so much better than everything else. I don't think that's the reality. I feel like in this game, what I learned in Star Wars Unlimited, by the way, kind of applies here as well. In Star Wars Unlimited, I was overvaluing drawing cards, and in that game, you draw 2 cards every turn, which makes your ability, you just have the ability to kind of puke cards and always ramp if you're allowed to, right? If you think you're allowed to. Well, in our game in Riftbound, I feel like drawing cards doesn't necessarily mean as much, because at some point you're not gonna be able to use all of them. Specifically in aggressive decks like red and purple, when your cost is very high, so the more cards you have in your hand, it just doesn't mean that you're gonna get an advantage out of that. You get more options, but you're not gonna convert the amount of cards into actual advantage because you're not gonna have enough energy and power to use them in the first place. Which makes me think that it's better to be in the other direction, which is Annie directly. She allows you to use more cards while you try to get card advantage from a different engine, like for example Scrapheap and Ezreal. So I feel like in the upcoming metagame, Annie is gonna be better than Draven, and the reason to play Draven is a signature spell that we're going to discuss in a second. But overall, he's still very powerful, so I'm going to give him 5 stars, but I don't think he is better than Annie. Also, you have to remember that Annie's effect comes into play starting from round 1, when you just untap it and have your resources ready to use, for example, the Hard Bargain, the new counter spell, right? Which is like insane to like gamble that you have it in your hand every turn. That is incredibly powerful, and the opponents will have to play around it every single turn. That is not going to happen with Glorious Executioner, the Legend of Draven. And also, remember that his ability is only going to trigger when it's going to have a meaning, which means that if there's no combat, you're not going to draw a card. Your opponent might actually also dictate that when that combat will happen, right? You have abilities, you have tools in purple to make the combat happen when you want it by moving your opponent's units and so on. But it's going to be hard to orchestrate that every single turn, for example. So you're not drawing 2 cards every single turn just because you have Glorious Executioner. And that's why I feel also Annie is way more powerful than potentially Draven. But let's talk about the reason to play Draven, which is his signature gear, and also, of course, his champion unit, because you're gonna be able to play a champion unit that is just straight up better than Annie. At least that's what I think so, right? I'm not gonna be diversing too much into that conversation, but I think in most cases you would rather have Draven in your champion unit than the Annie that just gets you a spell from the graveyard and it has only 3 might. But the Spinning Axe, now this is nuts. 2 energy and 1 power cost, has a quick draw, so you can play it as a reaction, and then you don't pay the power cost for the equip because you already pay it built in, right? That's why it has the built-in cost, and it gives you plus 3 might, which is just absolutely bonker over the curve. Like you just get so much value out of this one card, and the only drawback here is the temporary, right? So you essentially open yourself to a possibility that if your opponent has a removal for a unit that was wielding the spinning axes, you need to find another target to wield the spinning axes and pay the power cost. If you don't do that, at the beginning of your next turn, you will lose the spinning axes. But like the card itself is worth the risk, and it's gonna be making you just so hard to play on the battlefield when you have any mana open, because plus 3 for 2 is over the curve, I would say, right? So you're gonna be able to catch a lot of people off guard with this. You play around some removal, like damage space removal, and that is incredibly valuable. So 6 stars for his signature spell, but overall Glorious Executioner gets a lower rate by me. But when it comes to the metagame, I'm putting Draven on A and not on S. Even though he's very strong, I feel like he's not gonna be more popular than Annie in the same colors, because people will just favor those energy, as I explained before. It's kind of similar with like how Rumble is not gonna be better even with Max than Kai'Sa, I think. So both of them are a little bit lower on the respective metagame because of the competition that they have from set 1 legend. Reksai is red and yellow. I'm gonna read both the signature and the legend at the same time because it's a different type of archetype than other deck. The legend says, when you conquer, you may exhaust me to reveal the top 2 cards of your main deck. You may play one, then recycle the rest. This signature spell is very similar. It costs you 2 energy, 1 power. It's called Void Rush. Reveal the top 2 cards of your main deck. You may play one of them, reducing its cost by 2. Draw any you did not play this way. There's a lot of synergy here, and there's a lot of cards in the set that do something when they are being revealed. For example, Under Titan is a 6 drop with a 5 might that when it's being revealed, it generates you 2 energy. So in theory, you could play Void Rush, for example, reveal Under Titan, play the other card for 2 energy less, and then you generate also 2 energy. So you could play something for 0 mana if it was up to 4 energy, right? There's a lot of potential viability here when it comes to like showing what's on top of the deck. The problem is, and becomes very apparent once you start playing this deck, that a lot of the times it's hard to plan the round when you play with Void Rush and the Void Burrow effects, because you have to make sure that you like conquer first if you're talking about the legend, but if you start with turn with the Void Rush, it might change the plan on what you initially wanted to do, or you have to fish and then limit the amount of cards that you want to play from your hand. Because if you change your mind, if you played Void Rush, you're not gonna get the 2 costs reduced if you don't play it from the cards that are revealed, right? So you're very limited to what you want to open the turn with. So there's a lot of clunkiness involved in here. And I feel like I tried playing a little bit of the Reksai without baited hook, but I feel like the only way of playing Reksai right now is gonna be the baited hook, because then you can actually play the cards from your hand that should be in the deck, sacrifice them, and then reveal more cards and maybe play something that should be on the top of your deck, right? So you're gonna have a little bit of a fail-safe when it comes to drawing too many cards that you typically would like to have in your deck still. But overall, it's incredibly hard deck to play efficiently, and there's a lot of RNG involved, which I feel like that's what players want to avoid while playing card games. They understand that there's random stuff happening, but they want to limit the amount of random stuff happening, and because of that, decks like this are not gonna be fan favorites, but also gonna be inconsistent. If the power level is very high of this card with like baited hook, for example, there's gonna be a chance that this deck will perform at some tournaments and maybe even win it. But the problem is, again, also, we have to think about the fact that we're coming into a metagame where equipment hate is gonna be very common, or at least should be. And then a deck with baited hooks will have a big problem to solve. Actually, it's not solvable. It's just you get destroyed your baited hook, unlucky. Your kind of deck entire crumbles because that was the synergy that you want to play with, right? So do you have a plan B when you don't have the baited hook? That's gonna be the question to answer as well. So for now, at the beginning of the metagame, I'm putting Reksai on the top of C. Maybe someone smarter than me is gonna be able to make a deck that actually works much better than what I imagine it can do. So then maybe it will change. But for now, top of C, she is a very different archetype that is gonna be in the league of her own, and I don't think she's gonna have a lot of competition, but I don't think it's gonna be good in the upcoming metagame. Ornn is fantastic. He's gonna be a 6-star in my opinion. He is green and blue and adds power as a reaction that can be used for playing gear or equipping gear or using the ability. Now, all of this is already very good because you have a lot of synergy involved. First and foremost, blue allows you to draw more cards, right? And also deal damage-based removal. Green allows you for counter spells and also equipment that makes your units survive more, right? Because you have like Guardian Angel, for example, or Zhonya's. And remember that in a deck that is specifically tailored towards equipment, you're gonna have less units. So making them stick is very important. And even if your deck is gonna be met with hate towards equipment, you're playing in a color combination that allows you to draw more cards. For example, the Poro Snacks, that is for 1 energy, 1 power, and then can be used again for the same cost, draws you cards. For Ornn, this essentially means that you just pay energy to draw more cards because you're not gonna use power for those Poro Snacks, right? So you have the ability to come back even when your equipment is gonna get destroyed, so you're not gonna lose that much valuable value, I guess. So overall, I feel like Fire Below the Mountain, the Legend of Ornn, is the deck that is gonna make equipment playable in the upcoming metagame, and also he has incredibly fun signature gear, so that also will make players, I think, play it more often. And on top of that, he has a very playable champion unit for 6 energy, no power cost, and 4 might that gets buffed with each equipment attached to him. Incredibly annoying creature to deal with, very hard to remove. Potential combo with the flute to make it deflect 4. It's kind of, I don't think that's gonna be a little bit over the top, but in general, he has a very playable champion unit, and combining that with blue in green, which have decent units on their own, you have suddenly a very playable deck, even without the signature spells. And we're gonna talk about them because he is in the unique spot where he has 3 different ones, where every other deck has only 1. First is Forge Fire Cape for 4 energy, 2 power. But in case of Ornn, that's 1 power, right? When I attack or defend, deal 2 damage to all enemy units here. Now, single-handedly, this makes you have an answer in the deck against some swarm decks like Victor, for example, right? Unless Victor, of course, plays no units. That's also a possibility. And it gives you +3 might. This just by itself is phenomenal, and I think it's a fantastic card. Although a little bit on the more expensive side, it is incredibly good. Now, if I would have the option, I would probably just play 3 times Forge Fire Cape rather than the other signature spells, because the other signature spells, I'm ranking them a little bit lower. Rabadon's Death Crown is for 4 energy, 2 power, and your spells and abilities deal 3 bonus damage and also give +3 might. Now, this Death Crown has way more synergy when it comes to potential cards from your hand. Like, it makes the Death Below deal 4 damage on the entire battlefield because it buffs every single spell source damage, right? So if you deal 3 times 1, it deals 3 times 4 instead. This also works with the Deathfire Cape, right? So, sorry, Forgefire Cape. This deals 2 damage, but when you have also Rabadon's Death Crown, it deals 5 damage. But that's, again, like, if you have a setup like this, you probably just win the game anyway, right? So there has to be a lot of hate towards equipment in the upcoming metagame, because otherwise Ornn is going to make those unkillable units that won't be able to just destroy everything on battlefields. And then you have Shurelya's Requiem, which is 4 cost, all of them are 4 cost, right? And also 2 power. Your units here have ganking and gives +2 might. Now, this is probably the weakest one, but it allows you to set up some potential double conquers with potentially leaving like a small unit on the battlefield that you just conquered with your big unit, right? Let's say you have that Ornn champion unit with Shurelya's equipped. You go to a location because you're a big unit that has like 8, 10, 12 might. You conquer that. Then you're going to be able to play like a small unit on that battlefield to control it. And if you somehow have an option to either untap it or next turn to just go to other location, you're going to be able to do that because you have the ganking. So you don't lose the time between going back to base with your big unit and then going back to the other battlefield to conquer it, right? So Shurelya's is probably a key piece to finishing games, but the problem is it's only one piece in the entire deck, right? So probably, maybe, I don't know, Time Warp is also going to be played in Ornn. I have no idea, but I feel like I would still prefer to play multiple Forge Fire Capes rather than have the other options available. Although maybe 2 Forge Fire Capes and Rabadon Death Crown would be ideal. I'm giving them both of them 3 stars, but that doesn't mean those are bad cards. They're just a little bit more synergetic, or like trying to do more value by comboing with other cards, right? While Forge Fire Cape on its own is incredibly valuable and can change the state of the game by itself, which I feel like is very important in Riftbound overall because it's such a tempo-based game. So even though I'm giving it a little bit of the smaller amount of stars, I feel like they're still fantastic cards, but this is just in context of the other signature gear. But when it comes to the tier list, I'm gonna put him on top of S. I feel like he creates an archetype by itself that's gonna be a popular archetype because people just like to play power fantasies, and having a big unit, big chunky unit that is able to destroy everything on its path is one of those things that people like to play. The problem is that he's gonna be weak to yellow color because of cards like Call the Weak, Hidden Blade, and straight up just any kind of removal. I know that the gear will stay in place, but the problem is that you have to keep your units, right? So yellow, because of that, I feel like will rise in ranks, and that's why I feel like also Victor is gonna be our tier 1 deck, because he's gonna be directly affecting meta games where the number of units in decks is low, because then the yellow color removal gets more value when the opponents don't play that many units themselves, right? So for now, I'm putting him on top of S. I feel like he's probably not gonna be like the best deck in the entire metagame, but he's gonna be one of the main reasons why our metagame is gonna look like it's gonna look. So a lot of equipment and the removal being important, so for both equipment and the units. Now we have Jax. He's green and orange, Grandmaster at Arms, so Lucian colors, right? Lucian doesn't really have a space in the metagame right now, so I feel like Jax is gonna be a completely new introduction because not many people even played against Lucian. His power is very useful. For 1 energy and a tap, attach a detached equipment you control to a unit you control. So essentially, kind of in a similar way like Teemo is avoiding the hidden cost by paying energy, he avoids the equip cost of equipment by paying energy. Then the other effect is attach an attach equipment you control to a unit you control. If I'm not mistaken, that's the only way, apart from one of the spells, to unattach an equipment from a unit without the unit dying itself. So you're gonna be able to move your pieces around, which means that there's a lot of sequencing involved in playing Jax, which is always cool, but it's going to be a little bit more complicated because of that, because the sequencing will matter so much, right? And you have to make a decision because you have two effects built in into your legend. So there's a lot of options. People like playing a lot of options. I feel like he's going to be pretty popular as well, but also because of the fact that he's going to be able to pay energy instead of power, he's going to be able to play bigger units overall. So even though his deck is going to be one of those that has equipment in it, I don't think equipment hate will hit Grandmaster at Arms as much as the other equipment decks, because he's going to be playing big units anyway. I think it's going to be, you know, fitting Death Blooms, maybe the, what's the dragon called? The one that gives +8. Well, anyway, those big chunky orange units might be still played here in Grandmaster at Arms, even though you will have some equipment that would favor to be played with more mid-range options or like even lower curve, right? So overall, I feel like Jax is great, and there's gonna be a lot of ways of playing him, and he is again similar to Ornn, dictate a little bit how much hate towards equipment have to be in the sideboards or even in the main deck if they will be super popular. If Jax and Ornn are gonna be popular, we're probably gonna be looking at main deck hate towards equipment, which is not great if you don't play against a deck that has no equipment, right? So yeah, interesting, super interesting legend. And now let's talk about its signature spell. Counter Strike is for 2 energy, 1 power. It's a reaction. Choose a unit. The next time that unit will be dealt damage distant, prevented, draw 1. When I first read that, I was like, whoa, that's awesome, that is totally overpowered, right? But then I started thinking about it more, and I'm like, you know what, that's actually gonna be hard to squeeze into the deck, because let me explain this. The effect is incredibly powerful, and it's a cantrip as well. So you replace it in your hand, like all the pieces are there to make this card incredibly powerful. But the problem is, how do we fit all of the pieces into one deck which has 40 cards? Well, essentially 39, because there's the champion unit, right? So in a deck like this, when you play units, but you also play equipment, and you have to play equipment if you play Jax, you will have to also find space for enough amount of creatures, enough amount of equipment, and then you have to think, if I'm playing green and orange, do I play buffs or counter spells or all 3? Suddenly the deck becomes very, very small. And I feel like you cannot play Counter Strike over, for example, Guardian Angel, right? Or over, for example, Defy, because you will have more opportunities to use those spells in for cheaper, for example, and it will more effectively save your units from yellow color, for example. Like Counter-Strike doesn't only help against yellow, right? But it helps if you have a Defy against yellow, because then Call the Weak and Hidden Blade, they will not affect your unit. So do I play Defy, Counter-Strike, and Guardian Angels? That's 9 cards already. So do I limit it? Do I play only one signature spell? It's gonna be a very hard puzzle to solve, and that's why I'm giving it 4 stars, even though it's an incredibly powerful card. But in this current combination of colors of what we have available for Jax, I feel like I will be looking forward to the decks that Jax are being built, because I want to see how people think about Counter-Strike, if they're on a similar waves like I am, or maybe I'm just playing out wrong and this is a free off in every single Jax deck. So yeah, 4 stars for now, and even though I give Jax 6 stars, I'm putting him on top of A and not in S. I feel like he might not be an easy deck and as explosive or having such a ceiling to be comparable to the other S tier decks, but at the same time he's gonna be probably very stable, and he doesn't have competition in its colors, because who else would like to play Lucian instead when you have Jax? Now the problem is, again, if you're an equipment based deck, right, like Jax should be, how much are you being hit by the hate, and how will that look in practice? So for now I'm putting him in A. I feel like he's not gonna be tier S, and I'm not gonna be wrong about it, but we'll see in the future. Now I'll be honest with you, I feel like I'm not gonna explain too much about Irelia. She is just insane. The combination of colors is fantastic, purple and green. When you choose a friendly unit, you may exhaust me and pay power to ready it. When you conquer, you may pay 1 to ready me as well, so you can untap multiple times, attack multiple locations, battlefields, go with ganking if you have ganking between the, like, there's so many options. And the Defiant Dance, the signature spell, is one of the most broken cards in the entire game. For 1 energy and 1 power cost, it's a reaction that gives +2 might to a unit, and then another unit gets -2 might. But the thing is, this can target your own units with both effects. So then when you think about it, suddenly you can use the Blade Dancer effect on something that you give -2, in case you just want to untap more creatures. Like, it's the potential of outplays and possibilities of what you can do with the sequencing in Irelia is incredible. And I don't think it's gonna be an easy deck to play, but she is like top tier in my eyes for sure. And the funniest thing about Irelia is that I feel that you can build her in a way that is not limited to just one direction of attacking the game, and also because of the playstyles that you will have with players, that will also shift. So it's gonna be hard to have a consistent game plan against Irelias, because not only you're gonna have access to counter spells, buffs, but also to some degree you might play equipment because it has the synergy with the legend, right? Because equipment gives you the ability to untap creatures, but at the same time I feel like in the early meta game you might actually choose not to play any equipment to not be met with the equipment hate. And that is not going to be a big problem, but because you still have other options to targeting your own units to untap them with the legend themselves. And green also delivers you some potential engines to draw cards, so there's some value there that you might not have without the equipment typically, right? So all in all, what I'm saying, Irelia is going to be an S tier deck. So I'm putting Irelia on top of S ahead of Ornn. At least that's what I feel like right now is going to be happening with the metagame. Next is going to be Azir, Emperor of the Sands, green and yellow. Your Sand Soldiers have Weapon Masters. Sand Soldiers are always 2 might, at least for now. To create a Sand Soldier, you have to pay 1 energy, tap your Azir, and you can only do that if you played an equipment this turn. Not equip, you have to play it from your hand or from anywhere else, but you have to play it for it to count. So first, out of the gate, you have to make your deck about equipment. Otherwise, your legend just doesn't work, right? So you're going to be playing a lot of equipment for 1 energy because you want to play a 1 energy equipment turn 1 and then create a Sand Soldier. You have to also think about the fact that he has a limitation. He cannot play the Sand Soldiers in battlefields like Victor, for example, can, right? Because that would be a little bit too broken if you were able to play a token that instantly gets an equipment attached and be instantly on the battlefield that you control. So it's easier to hold, right? In this case, you don't have really that ability. And overall, I feel like because of this limitation, I don't think he's gonna be super playable, because there's a high chance that you're gonna get a clunky hand and then your entire deck crumbles. So you really are heavily dependent on how many playable equipment you can get into your deck and how often you will be able to play them every single turn, because you would like to do that. And also, when you play against a red color and you're just gonna be hit with a Thermal Beam, you're just gonna cry. Right, so I feel like there's a lot of pain points for Azir, which in my opinion make him a mediocre but playable legend, and he is gonna thrive against decks that will not play equipment hate. Then he's gonna probably destroy. But if equipment hate is gonna be there, or like an effect that bounces tokens and so on, then suddenly he is becoming way clunkier to play, right? And you don't want to play with a legend that doesn't have an effect in itself. So I feel like this is kind of similar to when I compare like Reksai. There's potential that the deck just breaks itself, and that is a problem, at least for me. I don't like playing decks like that, even though it sounds cool as hell on paper. And the signature spell is also pretty cool, but very expensive. 6 energy, 1 power. Play 2 Sand Soldiers token for each equipment you control, then ready 2 of them. So even if you have 4 equipments, you're gonna spawn 4 tokens, but you can untap 2 of them. And then of course, because they have Weapon Master, they can attach the equipment to themselves, even to the ones that are not untapped. So there's a lot of potential when it comes to this card. But again, what if you don't have the equipment on the board? Suddenly, your signature spell doesn't have the value. And if you're met with the equipment hate, like mass equipment hate, that might actually happen a lot. And playing a 6 energy card to get 1 token, that is not a good deal, right? Even if it comes like ready. So you need to have at least 2 equipment pieces on the board to play this for that minimum amount of value that at least I perceive from this card. So synergy based, very reliant on what is happening from the opposing side of the board, which is, I feel like, might not be the best. But at the same time, it's gonna be similar to what I said about Lucian. If there's a metagame where the hate for the equipment will die down, then Azir might actually just completely wreck faces. And yeah, that's about it. So I'm putting Azir in the B tier when he's playable, but probably not very popular. And because of that, maybe he will perform better than he should when he's gonna be under the radar. But I feel like he's definitely not top tier deck. Ezreal is gonna be a very tricky legend to make a incredibly well-oiled machine, I think. Because he is drawing cards, he's blue and purple. He can draw one card as a reaction if you chosen enemy units and or gear twice this turn with spell or unit abilities. So for example, he has synergy with the repeat cards, like the new smokescreen that for 2 energy gives -2, but then you can repeat and target something again. So then you can draw it. Essentially, it changes your spell for 4 mana and -4 might to a cantrip as well, which is in theory fantastic. Now the problem is gonna be that you're gonna be having most likely so many cards on your hand that you're gonna have to find a way of puking them on the board, right? Something that I explained before with DRAVEN. Now in blue, that's a little bit easier because you can use Hextech Anomaly, for example, when you change your power costs into energy so you can play more cards, right? And then in blue, you also have cards like Card Shop will give you access to gold on demand, and you also have the possibility of playing the 2-drop, the power that generates gold too. On top of that, you have the purple Ezreal for 3 mana, which is absolutely broken. And the question is, will you play that in his deck and scrap heaps on top of that? I feel like that is just probably too much draw power. Like, one of those things in this game is that you think decks like Kai'Sa or Ornn would like to play seals, but because the inherent ability is Ice Seal, they will not play seals themselves. And I feel like Ezreal might not play scrap heaps with his own deck because maybe he might be having too much draw. I mean, probably I'm wrong, and scrap keys are gonna still be played because that's just too easy combo with the new Ezreal that just comes in, discards the cards and draws you cards, and then you have the location as well, sorry, the battlefield that allows you to do the same. So you have consistency suddenly with the scrap heap. So probably that's gonna be still in the deck. But again, this thing that you have to solve is how to play all of those cards that you will have in your hand. And I feel like Hextech Anomaly is probably the answer, but we'll see. But overall, he's incredibly powerful. I feel like he's one of those cards that wait to be broken with a very potent deck. Now, how this will translate to actual gameplay, I don't know yet, but it's very exciting to look at cards like Ezreal and think what it can do. Ezreal's signature spell is 3 energy, 1 power cost, action. Banish a friendly unit, then its owner plays it ignoring its cost. Deal 3 to an enemy unit at a battlefield, banish this. It has to have banish, otherwise it would be a constant loop with Fizz, which would just replay Arcane Shift from the graveyard. So that's why it has banish, so you cannot really loop it and just completely break the game. Now, on its own, it's a fantastic card. It is like really phenomenal. Like blinking your card shops, blinking your Fizzes, blinking your Ezreals, all of that sounds phenomenal. And then you deal damage on top of that on the battlefield, so you're gonna be having a lot of value, a lot of potential like way of dealing with creatures. And there's so many cards that you want to just squeeze into this deck. I feel like that's gonna be the main problem of Ezreal. How do we play all of the nasty cards that we have access to in both purple and blue at the same time and win the game? But all of this, like, this is really exciting and waiting to be broken. So yeah, you have to also look at Arcane Shift in a way that every time a blue or purple unit gets released to the game with an enter the battlefield effect, you have to think about, wait, how good this is with Arcane Shift. Can we break the game somehow when it's being blinked, right? And think about it this way as well. Even when you have like a bigger creature, like the 7-drop, can't remember the name, but the guy that 7-drop, 7 might comes into play, discards a card from the opponent's hand. You can also blink that card, which essentially will change your Arcane Shift into deal 3 damage to battlefield and discard a card from your opponent's hand. Now that is kind of incredible as well, right? So you have a lot of potential ways of winning the game because Arcane Shift can be flexible on what you wanted to achieve in this particular moment. So yeah, 5 stars by me. And when it comes to the overall tier list, I'm gonna put Ezreal on bottom of A for now, because I feel like he's gonna be incredibly strong, probably stronger than the Jax and the Draven, but he is gonna be complicated to play and to build, so I don't expect Ezreal to like be instantly super dominating or something, but I feel like he might be there. But I'm putting him on A because he's definitely incredible. Now let's talk about Renata. She has Victor colors, blue and yellow. Says when you or an ally hold, you may exhaust me to play a gold gear token exhausted. While your score is within 3 points of the victory score, your gold also adds energy. The obvious synergy here is that you want to play the game with time warps and just make it more possible for you to play multiple time warps to just win the game by cheating out the game. Now, I feel like the power itself of Camp Baroness doesn't really give you much. I would rather just play Victor. Like, you kind of have to play a similar deck to Victor, but Victor's gonna be always more consistent because of the fact that he can just play units. Whenever you have floating mana, you use your Victor power, you get a unit that those units can be converted to points. And I feel like because of that, Victor is just straight up just so much better than Renata. And for now, I don't think there's a reason to play Renata over Victor, because you can do basically the same, right? Similar combos. If you play Jax, sorry, not Jax. If you play Jace, you want to play the combo with the 7 cost gear and some gold. You can do that in Victor as well. You are not required to play a Renata to do that. And Renata will be a little bit more consistent with it because any unit will be able to get the gold, but you still have to hold it, right? You have to hold the location. So it's not that easily achievable. So I'm giving her 3 stars, although probably that's too much. But maybe in the future, I probably should have taken the 2 stars. Anyway, but what's really cool about Renata is her signature spell, the Hostile Takeover. Incredibly expensive, 5 energy, 2 power cost, hidden, which then of course only pays 1 power. Take control of an enemy unit at the battlefield, ready it. So, if I'm assuming correctly, I don't know how it works exactly, but if the combat would, this is mid-combat, if you use it, your unit now suddenly gets recalled to your base, or is it on your battlefield? If it stays on your battlefield, then it will allow you to flip the might and essentially win the combat, which making it a very powerful trick, right, as a hidden card. And you lose control of that unit and recall it at the end of the turn. So you probably would like to have an avenue of sacrificing this unit, right? So maybe something like Call the Weak, or maybe a baited hook, because you definitely would like to play your signature spell, right? But then if you play a baited hook deck in Renata, you have to change the way that you want to play the entire game, and then the deck suddenly becomes way different from a Victor deck, right? So I don't know if there's something there, but there's a very cool way of playing Hostile Takeover with the card from set 1 called Ava Achiever, which allows you, this is like a 4 mana, 5 mana, I think, 4 might, that when you attack, you're able to play a hidden card for 1 blue power. So essentially, while attacking, you're gonna be able to play Hostile Takeover. And that is a incredibly powerful card. But that's like a 2-card combo that is game breaking, I would say. Now it is worth playing Renata over Victor for just that. I don't know, but again, then you have to play baited hook, and if you play baited hook, you are baiting yourself into playing a deck that might be met with equipment hate, and that is not great. So for now, I'm giving it 4 stars. It's a very powerful card, but we'll see how it will land in the metagame. But overall, I'm not impressed with Renata. So Renata, I'm putting at the bottom of the C tier, although she is probably lingering on even a potential lower end, like a B. But I don't, like, she is playable, but I think not as playable as Victor, which kind of falls in line with all the 3 over here, Rumble and Lucian. So yeah. Now we have Sivir, orange and purple. When you recycle a rune, you may exhaust me to play a gold gear token exhausted. When 1 or more enemy units die, ready me. So you can do multiple untaps and create gold tokens whenever you recycle a rune. Remember, this cannot be used when you just use your gold token. You have to recycle a rune to create gold. So essentially, you don't de-ramp yourself when it comes to the power, but you de-ramp yourself from the potential energy. I feel like Sivir is gonna be incredibly good because she has access to purple, which is incredible by itself. There's an easy way of getting value out of her legend, and overall she's a very aggressive, so access to tricks, access to counter spells because of the new purple stuff. You have access to powerful units like the 6-drop Sivir and the 4-drop Sivir. I'm actually not certain which one's better, probably the 6-drop one. The 6-drop Sivir is just capable of absolutely annihilating boards. So specifically also when you have access to purple, right, to like move units around and then make that overkill and kill other units that are in base or on the other battlefield. So there's a lot of potential there with Sivir, and I feel like she's gonna be competing for the same players as Irelia, because it's to some degree similar playstyle, I feel like. But what's interesting with Sivir, I feel like she's not gonna be playing a lot of equipments. That's at least what I think like. You know, it's like, might be wrong about this, but the high rating comes from the fact that you're gonna be able to get this value almost every turn. Now the question is, how do I play this deck efficiently to not get stuck? So it will require a lot of deck building choices that are gonna be a little bit counterintuitive, I think, because of the potential of deramping, not even potential, but the way that you're gonna be deramping yourself. So it's gonna be very interesting to watch the evolution of Sivir. And also has signature spell on the hand for 1 energy and 2 power, ready your unit. that just sounds broken. I'm gonna be honest. I feel like there's a reason why this card costs 2 power and doesn't cost more energy. Like, the effect itself is incredibly powerful. Now, obviously, to benefit from it the most, you need more than 1 unit on the board already. But even with 1 unit, this is still great value, right? Because if you have units that have ganking, for example, and the new Sivir, the 6-drop has ganking, right? So you're gonna be able to go between... No, sorry, the 4-drop has ganking, and it's enabled by the On the Hunt, right? So you can use that new Sivir to attack with Accelerate, then use the On the Hunt, go to our location, and suddenly she's like an 8 power, but you deramp yourself a lot, right? But when you combine that with the ability of the legend, suddenly you're getting that value back, and the explosiveness can be met with enough time that you get from the explosiveness to rebuild your mana to then again do a second strike. It's nice to see a deck that is probably gonna play a lot differently than other decks that we have seen so far in the game, because there's gonna be like a pause. You know, you play Sivir, you explode, there's 1 turn of pause when your opponent gets a little bit of a briefing room, and then suddenly another wave of a attack from Sivir comes out when she gets the energy back. So maybe combining her with like, for example, battlefields that will channel runes will make sense with Battle Mistress. But that's probably a way ahead of what we're gonna have to fix first with Sivir. But overall, she's, I think, very good. And the signature spell, I know it doesn't look impressive, but believe me when I say this, I think this is one of the best cards of the entire set. So yeah, you definitely want to look at Sivir, and whenever there's an opponent on the other side, you have to be very aware of what potentially that Sivir will be able to come up with during the combat. And when it comes to the tier list, I'm gonna be putting Sivir ahead of Jax. Yeah, ahead of Jax, I think so. Although, man, I don't know. Here, I feel like maybe Execfo, but overall she's an A tier, I think. Fiora is in colors of set, so orange and yellow. When one of your units becomes mighty, you may exhaust me to channel 1 rune exhausted. Essentially, she's kinda similar to Volibear, but in different colors. And instead of playing huge creatures, she's gonna play small creatures that become bigger. So overall, you want to play ways of buffing your creatures. Now, again, if you want to do that via equipment, you're gonna be met with hate, potentially at the early metagame of Spiritforged. There are some equipments that perfectly go in line with, for example, the BF Sword gives +3. So your 2-drops can become mighty. If your 2-drops become mighty, well then suddenly you're gonna be ramping up. Your Fiora actually has access to 3 champion units that are all playable. And that is also very important to think about, because then you're gonna have, depending on the metagame and depending on the matchups, you're gonna be swapping your champion units between game 2 and 3 if necessary, because all 3 are good. The base one from Origins, if it gets buffed, right, it becomes mighty, it has synergy, it becomes very hard unit to kill because it has deflect, shield, and ganking as well, right? So it's very, very potent. Then you have the other Fiora that allows you to untap units when they become mighty, so another synergy here, right? Then you have the third Fiora, that is the cheapest one for free energy and 1 power cost, but you can actually play with this on your first turn if you go second, and then your opponent is met with the situation where if they put a unit on the battlefield, that unit will most likely die to a Fiora attacking into it, because now she becomes a 6 might, she becomes mighty, she channels a rune exhausted and gets the conquer. So there's a lot of possibilities and counterplay. It's very different playstyle from other decks, I feel like, you know, because you also will be having 2 directions that you want to build Fiora in, either equipment or buffs, you know, and because of that you're going to use different creatures in the deck as well. So this is going to be very interesting to see. And also her signature spell is absolutely bonkers. 2 energy, 2 power. So the developers do recognize that is a powerful spell. It's a reaction. Choose a friendly unit and a spell, counter that spell and give that unit plus might equal to that spell's energy cost this turn. I mean, yeah. Your opponent will attack into a creature, or you attack into a battlefield. You have 2 open. Now suddenly your opponent has to think, wait, if I'm gonna play a spell and he will counter it, then his unit suddenly gets a buff by itself. What if that unit wasn't mighty before, but now becomes mighty, and now it also triggers the legend? Like, there's the synergy is here. And also, when we compare it to a Counter-Strike from Jax, this is way more flexible. Even though it doesn't draw you a card, you are basically removing any kind of doubt of how that unit can be dealt with, right? So it doesn't matter if it's a yellow removal that straight up says remove a creature, right? You can riposte. If it's a deal damage, you can riposte, right? So I feel like it's a great card overall, and it will be so hard for the opponents to play around it because of the potential plus might that you can also use on a different unit that is not on the battlefield, right? So I mean, well, that depends, because why would you play this on a, I mean, yeah, whatever. Anyway, the point is, this is really incredibly powerful signature spell, and what is even more important, it doesn't say that you can counter only enemy spell. In a dire moment, there can be possibilities when you counter your own spell just to get a buff, right? So you play something that will be, I don't know, targeting your own unit or an opponent. It will not have an impactful effect itself, but then you counter it with your riposte, and because it was like a free energy card, you get plus 3 might, right? So in dire needs, you can use this on an own spell. But otherwise, I feel like Fiora is nasty, but under the radar. I don't know how many people are talking about Fiora, but I feel like she might be one of those sleeper legends in the expansion. So I'm putting Fiora in between here, DRAVEN and Sivir. I feel like potentially Ezreal is gonna be the most powerful out of the all tier A, but it's gonna be the most hard to find a well-oiled deck to make that happen, while those other 4 have a lower floor, which will be easier for people to find working decks with. So, but all of them are incredibly playable. Overall, this expansion has a very high power level, and I'll be honest with you, I'm kind of surprised, because coming from other card games that have similar systems with like a legend or like a leader or something, right, many of them are not playable. And for example, in Star Wars, we get like 16 legends, 16 leaders every single expansion, and out of all of them, maybe like 3 are playable at a competitive level. Here I would say, well, 7, 8 is very playable. 9, which is Reksai, is probably playable, but not very great. And the other 3 are like, well, none of them are feeling unplayable, which is great. And I hope this will keep up, because that will make the game more diversified and more interesting to play in. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. See you guys next time. Bye-bye.